You guys are taking me very seriously,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm not serious at all.
You have to be
So,
like,
but
whatever.
we do need to decide how heavy metal drummer starts.
I want you
Can
to
we please
understand.
fucking figure this out, guys.
I want you to understand what I'm trying to say.
I don't have to understand you all the time, Joshua. It's okay.
Right now is the time for me to leave everything I know behind.
We've got solid state technology, tapes on the floor, and some songs we can't afford to play. We've got Greg, aka the Chattanooga Kid, over here on vocals singing to a 1917 Western Electric condenser mic.
Hello.
And over on the stand-up bass, hand-carved in his wood shop out back, we've got Brian, aka Tugboat.
Everybody feeling good tonight? All right.
And I'm Joshua, aka Walt Whitman's nephew, over here on the refurbished Zepp Theremin.
I like that it's refurbished.
We're the Rabbit Fighters. Yeah, you can't buy new theremins.
I'm playing a harmonium with a Dremel.
I thought it was going to be JR on the jug.
Juggy, here's JR on the jug over here.
I was just digging into the depths of my Americana knowledge right there.
Wait, are we reviewing Old Crow Medicine Show or someone else? Who are we reviewing?
We're talking about Wilco.
Wilco, okay.
An American band, nay, a Chicago band, Wilco. At least the episode started out that way. So, because at the end of last week's episode, I picked I Am Trying to Break Your Heart, the 2002 Sam Jones directed documentary, which covers a sizable portion of the recording of Wilco's landmark album, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. But after watching I Am Trying to Break Your Heart, the Fighters, we felt strangely unsatiated. We wanted more. More, dear listener, more. So this episode isn't just about I Am Trying to Break Your Heart and Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. It's also about the late Jay Bennett, multi-instrumentalist and studio artist whose unceremonious firing from Wilco immediately after the completion of Yankee Hotel Foxtrot and the subsequent years in the wilderness before his tragic death in 2009, as told in the 2021 documentary, Where Are You, Jay Bennett?
Brian, we need you to come.
No.
He died, I think.
I have respect for Jay Bennett's death. Okay?
I do too.
It was very sad at the beginning. Like,
it was.
They made a sign from Walgreens.
Oh,
wrote it. Where are you? And then it turned out next day he was actually dead.
He was. Oh God,
it's terrible.
Yeah,
I followed this band from almost the outset, and blow by blow, followed this band, like all the side projects and all this other stuff. So yeah, I really do feel this one. When Jay Bennett died, I was like, no, God damn it.
I think that's what makes this such an interesting pick. And, anyone who's listened to our subsequent 40 plus episodes knows that I'll often say that our musical picks it's challenging. However, this one was interesting in that we watched it early and then there was a lot of side chatter. Like, I think we all got sucked in a little bit more than we thought we were going to get sucked in. Cause I think just the three of us being fans of this band, and for all intents and purposes, we're all from Chicago, and this was like our ages kind of made this thing, and it was like, oh yeah. And I haven't seen this documentary. It came out, was it 2002?
2002, yeah.
Yeah. So I saw this in the theater, like in a small theater in Gainesville, Florida. And
was Tom Petty there?
Maybe. You know what?
He just hangs out in Gainesville.
No, I asked and he was like, nah, dude, I gotta go to the zombie zoo. And I'm like, all right, fuck off.
Let's go to Buffalo Wild Wings. He was like, hey, what's going on?
Sitting in a booth in the
Me
corner.
and the Traveling Wilburys are coming up with another album.
I think he was hanging at Mellow Mushroom.
Mellow Mushroom.
Good rap.
And so anyways, where I was going with this is that I think there was a lot more emotion that was stirred up by rewatching this than I anticipated there going to be. And
emotion. Wow. All right.
Well,
it's like when they dredge the Chicago River and all the silt comes up from all the crap that got buried in the bottom.
Dave Matthews, bus driver, pulled the lever and dropped all the shit on it.
That's at the bottom of the Chicago River now.
Definitely still there.
Whatever wasn't on their heads.
So anyways, we'll get into it, but I just thought it was interesting that I did not think rewatching this, because I had seen it many times. And I had even read the book from what's his name. He's in the documentary where this.
He sounds like an AI, bot trying to impersonate Jeff Tweedy reading his own book. It's just like,
No, not that one. That's from his memoir, I think, of Let's Go So We Can Get Back. I'm referring to Learning How to Die by Greg Kot, which was
Sound
like
Opinions.
put out right after or around the same time as, basically chronicles the same sort of like YHF session type stuff. So
Chronicle of a Death Foretold.
what I was saying is I was really into this, invested into this band at this time. So I think it was interesting
Yeah.
to like go back and revisit this 20 years later
Yeah.
and kind of how my opinions may or may not have changed. I think is kind
Yep.
of fascinating to me.
For me, I had just moved to Chicago from DC and went home to Boston for a few months, made some money, went to Chicago to live. And I found this thing, it was housing to share. 2 dudes I didn't know, and they had a place in Wicker Park, which is where I decided I wanted to live. And there's this beautiful refurbished house they were trying to sell. I live with these 2 guys, this guy Mike and this guy Doug. And this guy Doug is a mess. He's just got this old, like 30-year-old disheveled truck with like duct tape on it and stuff. And the guy Mike is the guy who got us the place, and he's like all with it, you know. He's kind of like running the place a little bit, and like he and I were kind of trading music back and forth, and I would show him some stuff, and he was like, "You got to hear this. It's a Chicago band, you know, and you just moved here, and you got to hear these guys." And put in the Being There CD, and the first fucking song is Misunderstood, which is still one of my favorite Wilco songs. And so like right away, I was like, "Damn, this is fucking good." And then it just goes on and on. It's a double album. And the second album starts with Sunken Treasure, and you're like, damn, this is fucking good. You know, like it's just I love Being There. I think it's a great double. It's hard to make a great double album, but I think they pulled it off. This housing to share thing was for a few months, and this guy, Doug, who was the fuck up, kept leaving the door open. And these 2 guys in front of our house dealt drugs every single night. So every time I would come home from work, these 2 guys would be in front of our house, and they'd say like, "Hey man, you want to buy some weed?" And I'd be like, "No, thank you." They'd be like,
I live
"Okay."
here.
And I'd walk in my house. They asked me every night though, even though they knew me.
That's good customer service right there.
Yeah, it was, it didn't feel dangerous to me. So one morning I wake up in this house, stumble downstairs, Mike is there. He's like, "I kicked out Doug. He's gone." I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, he left the door open again, and then I went into the bathroom and he left a giant shit in the toilet. And I was like, "That's it. You're fucking gone."
The shit that broke the camel's back.
Did he take his Being There CD? Is what?
No, he didn't take it. No, he left it. It just I'm told that story just because like it was a weird part of my early life in Chicago, and it's intertwined with hearing Wilco for the first time in many ways, As
my story is
experiences
far
are.
less entertaining.
Yeah, how'd you first hear
Does it
him?
involve a turd? I mean,
No,
Dog and a turd.
it involves the fact that I saw their music video for Out of Mind, Out of Sight on MTV, and I was like, "Whoa, I like this song. It's
Yeah.
super catchy." And
There
they're
you go.
skydiving. Oh, look at that! This is so. When I got the album, I checked it out. I was like, "Oh, this is fantastic." And then I played it a lot, but it didn't like really cement. And then Summer Teeth came out, and I played that fucker nonstop, just a million times.
A million times.
A million times. Like that
Same.
record has stuck with me forever. and we
Same,
talked
same,
about this
same.
on the Desert Island episode, so we won't
Yep.
rehash it. But Summer Teeth, fantastic album. So,
Fantastic.
but I was living in Japan at the time when Yankee Hotel Foxtrot came out, and so I wasn't really hip to a lot of like the mythos of its recording and stuff. So a lot of this was like after the fact. So after I moved back to the States, I remember I'm Trying to Break Your Heart came out. Maybe I like caught it on DVD or something like that from the store, and maybe like Netflix sent it when it was still like discs coming.
That's how we got it. Yeah, they mailed us the DVD.
Yeah, and I put it on, and rewatching it, I can't pinpoint what turned me off to it. But I remember very I have very strong feelings about like, I don't want to watch this. Jeff Tweedy seems like a dick, and like this is like gonna really like screw up my view of like Wilco, and I'm just not in that headspace right now. So I didn't finish watching it, and so now watching it again, I'm like, he is kind of a dick, but it doesn't really bother me that much.
Yeah.
That's my less entertaining story.
Right. Brian, what you got?
No shit, no drugs.
I've been trying to rack my brain. I don't know, because for the longest period, this was my favorite band. But I remember owning Uncle Tupelo, and then when that split, then there's like, it's funny because it's like this is like the second divide. There was Uncle Tupelo, they split into the Sun Volt and Wilco, and then Wilco splits with their main creative songwriter and Jeff. So, but I remember liking Uncle Tupelo and Sun Volt, and then and then I kind of had this weird space where I don't remember, and then I remember like Yankee Hotel Foxtrot coming out and me sort of really zeroing in on that. But I've always loved. I guess my thought is I don't know if I can't imagine that I would not have heard. I think YHF just had a huge impact, but I think I had been a fan of like AM being there and Summer's Teeth ahead of that, and then that one hit. It was just kind of hit like a ton of bricks, and that I think it was just this caught me at the right time, like artistically, and I think I was in middle of college or something, and I was trying to play in bands and stuff like that. I think I remember I was trying to write songs and stuff with my friend Mike, and we can edit all this out. But anyways, it just caught me in the middle.
We're reading a lot
like,
of Frank Miller. Not Henry Miller.
Henry Miller.
I would say
it's
like,
very different.
when you're in college, like it's that point where like art is really, and I was reading a lot and I was trying to write music and all this other stuff. And so like lyrically, it just like hit me. I was like, oh my God, like joke about it in the documentary. So I was like, you think my lyrics poetry? But like, I definitely did. Like it was the first time I'd heard like I'd say nonsensical, but not like using words as fragments that have
not
meaning
obvious, non-linear stuff.
And you can, and it's melodic, but it can have meaning if you want it to. And what does it really mean? So it was a lot of that for me. And I was like just deconstructing this album constantly for a very long period of time in terms of like looking at this. And then I'd go back and obviously have those opinions about the previous albums, like one's more alt country and then they evolve, and being there's more straightforward acoustic double album, then Summer's Teeth is sugary and poppy, and then you got this one. And then anyways, long story short, I don't know where the love affair with Wilco started, but I know like up until that point I was seeing everything they sort of did through like rose colored glasses, which is interesting because now rewatching this documentary, I kind of had fallen out of love with Wilco.
Yeah, when did that happen?
Yeah.
If you don't know where it started, where did it end?
The Whole Love.
Full Black Note. Yeah, the whole love. Is that?
Yeah.
I think that was the last album of theirs that I had like gotten into, like dug into.
Yeah.
Because then they started down the whole Schmilko and Star Wars thing, and I'm like,
or Wilco, the album with the fucking
the camel on the front.
Yeah.
And whatever. I mean, I think bands have their, I'm okay with that. I'm okay. It's kind of like the Weezer thing, and that I had a very good relationship with the band for a while, and sometimes that relationship fades. But you always have those albums and where you're at and how you feel about them. So
I feel like I said this about Weezer too. Bands are allowed to get happy, like they're allowed to pull themselves out of their funk and pull their head out of their ass and smell the roses and be like, you know what, I've got it pretty good. But it doesn't mean we have to listen to the music they make at that point either. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times, I hate to say it, when bands that are talented or miserable, they're at their best. And when they get happy, you're like, or
successful.
There isn't a lot of, like that moment in this movie where the record label drops them and they're looking for, and it's just happened, it's fresh, right? And they show them playing live to kind of like take out their aggressions or whatever, and they play Misunderstood. And when Tweety gets to that part where he's like, I want to thank you all for nothing, and I've seen him do it pretty hard before. I've seen him live a bunch of times. The intensity and the rage behind him being like about to blow his fucking own head off,
how much of that is he playing up because the camera's rolling?
The camera's always rolling if you're that level though,
Anyone want to regale like the plot of this documentary to the audience, and then we'll go into the Jay Bennett factor.
I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, the director Sam Jones, who essentially had done nothing before this that I'm aware of per IMDb. Anyways, documentary filmmaker comes in, and the whole premise of the documentary is capturing Wilco, the Chicago-based rock band, as they sort of, I would say embark on, but it kind of tries to document their creation of their latest album at the time, which ended up subsequently be called Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, right? So it sort of sets out as like, hey, let's make a music documentary about this band as they make their music in a loft, right? So they've been essentially given carte blanche by the record label
Warner.
Reprise Records, I guess, to, Jay Bennett mentions like the figure 15, whatever, 150,000 or something. Go ahead, make a record, however you want to do it. Let the patients run the asylum. You can make it in your own studio and do whatever you want. So it's sort of a documentation of like, okay, watch them make this album.
Yeah, the creative process.
The creative process in creating this album and kind of how we go about it. And they, splice in interludes of them, a little bit about each person and blah, blah, blah. But what they kind of did was capture, at the time, the way I pictured it, or I interpreted it as he captured lightning in a bottle in a way, because it was at this like pinnacle of the band, right? Where there's like this tension, right? Like it's like the earthquake, right? There's like tension happening, and he happens to catch the band at a point of a fracture, right? Where, there's a lot of tension in the band. People have just left the band. The former drummer that had been on the past 4 albums was kicked out right before this started. Then you got a new drummer come in. There's tension between Jay Bennett and Jeff Tweedy, who are essentially the 2 lead songwriters and sort of creative drivers in the band. However, ultimately, at the end of the day, this is Jeff Tweedy's baby, right? It's his band.
Bennett arrived a bit later.
So Jay Bennett showed up at the end of their first album, which was called AM. So he was kind of hired on as like just a guitar player, but he's an incredibly talented multi-musicianist, guy, and sort of over time had worked his way into like a semi, joint writing partner to Jeff Tweedy, right? Like a creative
Lennon-McCartney.
Yeah, exactly. Like a creative partnership in the band.
Yeah.
Right. And so at that point in time, he's, wearing a billion hats. He's engineering, he's doing multi-instrumentals, helping write, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, so the 2 main themes that are happening is band tension, and also how, when they do finally finish the record and they deliver it to Reprise, them not liking it, wanting them to ask for changes, and then essentially the band going, fuck you, we're not changing it. And they drop them from their label because they just don't feel it's marketable or sellable or whatever. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the conversation is like, what has become of the music industry? Like, no one can sit with an album anymore. Like, it's okay if it's not marketable, it's shit. We don't care. We just cut the band loose. And then, that kind of unfolds in the fact that they essentially get another deal with another label that's under the same Time Warner label. None Such, which is essentially under the same umbrella. So it's kind of like, to use the Tyler Durden quote from Fight Club, he's like, they sell their fat asses back to them, right? So they cut them loose. They paid for the record, cut them loose with the record. Then they went and just sold it back to the same people for 3 times as much as they actually paid for it. So it was kind of this like David and Goliath thing of like this band being able to pull this off. All while sort of the backdrop was the band kind of doesn't fall apart, but they picture it as such. And we should talk about this because this is the Jay Bennett, Jeff Tweedy thing, is like, as good guy, bad guy, Jay gets kicked out of the band, and then the fallout from all of that. And then they go on and release this album, the big coup de grace, that, it receives a 10.0 on Pitchfork, and Rolling Stone claims it's a masterpiece and an instant classic, right? So like it goes off, and it is a fantastic album, but there's so many nuances we can talk about, like the mixing and who mixed it and why. So that's kind of
9/11, and
it's like
they streamed it for free afterwards, and
and I remember going to their website and listening. I remember like being along for the ride when this was going on, like hearing about all this stuff as it was happening and being like, release the fucking album. And then like, it's on our website. I like went to their website and like played it off their website, and just like, when will they bring this album out? It was neat to see these things that you remembered.
Yeah. And I thought it was crazy the timing on it. Like you said, the web thing, like I think they had finished it. It was like canned for like almost a year or something before.
8 months.
Or something like that. So, like by the time they finished and actually got it released.
So when did they fire Bennett exactly? It was like immediately, like right when it was done.
a little after, because they were playing gigs, because the record company was like, no, we don't want it, make changes. And I got to give it to Tony Margarita, their manager. That guy's gutsy dude, man. He was just like, they keep showing him in contact with the record label. He's just like, no, like, we're not going to change it. The band doesn't want to change it. You expect this guy at some point to be like, hey guys, the record, just make some changes. We want to make our money.
It's very
he's
ballsy,
like, at this point, I don't see what value the record company has for us. The guys can just go tour and make money and fuck the record company. And like they do it. So they go out on the road and they play a bunch of gigs, and they show him play in Milwaukee, where Brian's at, and they show him play Chicago. I actually was at that show, the 4th of July, Taste of Chicago show. And at some point in that sequence, when they were back crammed into vans and touring again and having that pressure, that's when they fired, Jay. That's when, he fired Jay, when Jeff Tweedy fired him.
So like the actual mixing of Yankee
It was
Hotel, so
done.
all of
Yeah,
the recordings
they
were done.
survived that.
They have all those tracks, and then at some point the band got sick of Bennett like tinkering around with it, or just didn't know his vision, or didn't agree with it, and they brought in O'Rourke, right?
Yeah, Jim. Well, he went around. Bennett was still in the band when he did this, though. He went to Jim O'Rourke and said, "Please remix this album."
And so they brought him in, and I remember seeing like reading some things, like Bennett eventually like capitulated and like agreed and like actually like bought in, like, okay, but he's gonna remix it, and he did while Bennett was still in the band, and he was like, it's he kind of liked O'Rourke's mix as well. Like he didn't like hate it or anything like that, but maybe that was part of that. He was also like he was just resigned to it. Yeah,
hurt by it. He's probably as hurt by it as Jeff Tweedy was hurt by the record label saying we don't like your album.
Yeah.
But he's just better at sucking it up and moving on. Bennett is.
So then that sets up 19 years later, 2021. Where Are You, Jay Bennett? The documentary comes out, which I'm going to confess, having owned Summer Teeth and just running the shit out of it, I'm the type of person, who just, I didn't dig very deep into it. So I didn't really know who Jay Bennett was.
Oh, yeah.
Like I didn't dig into the lore of Wilco ever. So last week when I was like, I'm going to pick I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, and you had mentioned, it's about, Jay Bennett. I was like, that was the first time those words, like, oh, there's drama here.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So
so this was all like news to me. We should rename this podcast Late to the Party.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
because I'm like perpetually just late to the party. So the whole Jay Bennett angle of it was completely foreign to me, but it was very, very compelling. Like once it gets going. So Brian, you recommending, hey, let's watch this one on top of it. It was really, it was kind of a dig back into his upbringing. There's a lot of interviews with his mom and like other bandmates and his brother, and just sort of like dives into like his psyche and the sort of like creative atmosphere in which he was raised, and all the different bands and musical interests that he went through in order to get to joining Wilco around AM. And then it actually like was really interesting watching these two things side by side, is then it like tries to fill in the blanks of everything that was sort of unsaid in I'm Trying to Break Your Heart. So
deliberately
even as far as like saying like scenes that I had just watched or that we had just watched and I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, and that were really like, whoa, that was a hell of a scene. Deconstructing it and saying, wait a minute, that actually happened 2 days before, and they re-edited it to make it look more dramatic than it actually was.
Tweedy barfing in the toilet 2 days before, happened 2 days before he was like, I'm gonna go throw up or something, when they were having that argument about mixing the two songs into each other into Heavy Metal Drummer. And I gotta say this, I Am Trying to Break Your Heart, it feels like the movie that killed the band. To me, it feels like extremely fortunate for the filmmaker. A lot of shit was extremely fortunate. It's like if a documentary filmmaker picked a backup quarterback, like if a documentary filmmaker had picked Tom Brady to follow around for his second year in the league, and then Drew Bledsoe goes down and they bring Brady in and he has a little bit of a shaky start, but he pulls it together, and then the end of it, they win the Super Bowl, and you're like, no fucking way. You follow this guy, the 199th pick. You just happen to follow him the year all this shit happens. So, the filmmaker it seems like he sniffed out a little bit that there was drama to be had here.
That up, yeah.
But he got pretty lucky. And it's the fulcrum point of like the music industry collapsing from the digital age, this band collapsing from a Lennon-McCartney style, fight. And then the record companies fight with the band and their management, all happening in the same thing. But I really do feel like, and they emphasize this in the Jay Bennett movie, these fucking guys, as soon as they brought cameras in there, it became like
changed
MTV's The
everything.
Real World.
Yeah.
Everyone became aware, and that fight that they have, that Jay Bennett has with Jeff Tweedy,
Yeah.
over how these songs get together, that goes on and on and on because there are cameras in their faces.
Yeah.
And
But how does heavy metal drummer start, guys? How are we going to start this fucking song?
I know. How are we going to start it? And like, well, why don't we
That
just mix it to
argument.
the end? Why don't we start mixing from the beginning? Well, why don't we just mix it at the end and then make the cut and then mix it from the beginning? But like, what Jay Bennett is doing is like, he's aware that Tweedy is clowning him for the camera. He's giving the camera looks like, can you believe this fucking guy? Because he's trying to be the cool guy. And Bennett is like trying to save face because he's on camera.
Yeah.
And because he's on camera and trying to save face, he gets stumblier and stumblier and stumblier, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And there are so many moments on this.
But you can see like how sincere he is.
Yeah, totally.
And so not having seen the Jay Bennett documentary at that point and just seeing I Am Trying to Break Your Heart, I mean, I even messaged you guys in the Slack chat about that scene in particular. It was just it was so crazy, but it doesn't sit right with you. I don't think it didn't sit right with me, because you can tell how sincere Jay Bennett is, and you can see kind of like the shit-eating grin on Jeff Tweedy's face when he's like mugging for the camera, and so that doesn't sit right. But you don't, without all that other that other side being
context.
told, then it doesn't really make sense. And all you're left with is like what they're telling you is that they didn't get along and different visions, and he was really annoying at the end of the day. And then the other documentary, the Jay Bennett documentary, sort of fills in those gaps. And who's to say who's exactly right? But I do feel like the Jay Bennett one definitely has the ring of truth.
I agree. I'm glad that it was brought to my attention even at that late hour. I was like, just even when his mother starts talking, I'm like, this is his mom. And one of my
she's not gonna shit on her kid.
Well, no, but it was just neat to see his mom. You know what I mean? Like, if it's
oh my god, the paperweight with the teeth in it.
Yeah, the paperweight with the teeth. That was crazy. She's like, she explains how Summer Teeth got its name, and I was like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then I love the part where they're talking about Mermaid Avenue, and he's like, his brother's talking about how he picked up a napkin, and on one side was Woody Guthrie's writing. And then Pete Seeger found the napkin and wrote a note to Woody Guthrie and gave it back to him. Like, hey, Woody, I thought you'd want this napkin. And Jay Bennett's sitting there like the ultimate music geek, holding a napkin that both Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie wrote on. And he's just like, that just made his fucking life, right there.
I loved all those Mermaid Avenue anecdotes, because I really do love that album as well.
I like those. But like, and they say this in the Jay Bennett doc, is like, they're making a film, they're making drama, they're juxtaposing things on purpose to make Jay. And when I saw I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, this time around, they had that moment where he kicks Jay out of the band, and they show them dancing around on the lakefront in Chicago, and then they cut to Tony Margarita, and he's like, it's really tough when you kick someone out of a band, because they go from being famous to playing for 35 people in a little club. And they immediately cut to Jay Bennett looking as lone as hell in a black and white movie, where you can't see anything but blackness behind him. Which, first of all, I think it's fucking pretentious that they made.
I wanted to bring it up.
Put
a pin in that. We're talking about black and white.
I know. Yeah.
Finish your thought on the stage thing.
It gives them all this like yawning blackness of aloneness that they surround Jay Bennett with, and he's like, and they don't show the crowd, and you can't see who else is there, and you're like, oh fuck, he's playing for 35 people in a little
he's got to
club.
Start over.
He's not famous anymore.
Poor Jay Bennett.
And you know why he's not famous anymore? Because Jeff Tweedy is the guy. And if Jeff Tweedy got cut by the band, we've already seen him play the Fillmore, and adoring fans will flock to the show, and they'll flatter him on stage and afterward. And, but Jay Bennett, if you get cut and you're Jay Bennett, that the half talent, medium talent, as they screamed at Chevy Chase, then you're dead. If you're out of the loving arms of Jeff Tweedy, you're nothing.
Yeah, it seemed like a bit of a hatchet job there.
Well, what I thought was interesting about that is because, Jay Bennett had, done subsequent albums and had like a writing partner in Southern Illinois. And the guy talks about, he talks about that scene. He's like, what they don't show you is that the place was packed.
Yeah.
Like, so
Yep.
he's like, you only see it from this like low camera angle on Jay being like with an acoustic guitar singing a song that essentially is a
Right.
Wilco song, like, oh, they let him escape with this one song and he
Right,
gets to go
yeah.
sing it with his guitar
Oh, he
somewhere.
has to
But
prop his career up with a
Yeah.
Wilco tune.
So-
yeah, right.
and then even the former drummer, which I agreed with, who's in that documentary, who was kicked out of the band prior to this album for Glenn Koch. I know I'm probably butchering his name.
Kochi, yeah.
I always thought
yeah.
it was Kochi or Koch. I wasn't sure, but
Yeah.
so anyway, they cut to him and he's interviewed in the Jay Bennett documentary quite a lot, and he's like,
Mhm.
he's like, it's a fucking low blow, to
Yeah.
like cut to him, and he's like, why?
It was a low blow.
I do. That's the one thing I took away from it this time is, like I said, in the heyday of my Wilco love, I saw this documentary different, and then I saw it as Jeff is the artist, right? He's
a poet.
He's the talent. He's the force.
he's the magic in the band, right?
Yeah.
And now seeing it 20 years later, I was like, man, they really fucking vilified Jay on purpose. Like,
Yeah.
Granted, like, I'm sure he wasn't the easiest guy to get along with and whatever. I'm sure he was quirky. You watch his documentary and shit, and everyone said that about him, but it's like, it seemed far more obvious to me the way it was edited to make it seem like villain, good guy. Like, oh, he just can't, like, he was just too difficult to work with, So I don't know if he wasn't there, if it wouldn't be the same, but the only argument I can make is I like the albums that he's on the most.
Yeah.
So there's something about his contribution to this.
Part of the ingredients.
Exactly. In the music gumbo that he adds to it that, and I think like any good
gumbo.
Yeah, like I think like any good Lennon McCartney, any sort of like relationship that's artistic, like maybe.
Look, this band was going to blow up in this way eventually anyway, but I think they would have lasted another album maybe. I think the movie really sped up the demise of this band, and people.
When you say that, what do you
camera.
mean? Because they have, I don't know, even like 15 albums under their belt.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people would say that they're not dead. Like,
what I'm saying,
talking about
before you answer
artistically,
that, I would say, but I mean, they had. Because I'm curious what you're going to say here, because then I would say they put out A Ghost Is Born and like Sky Blue Sky. Like, there's a couple good albums after this too. So
do you want? But like, guess what they recorded during the sessions for the Yankee Hotel Foxtrot? Hummingbird, all this crap that was on A Ghost Is Born was written in the same sessions. It's like, it's like Hole, where like Courtney Love has this first album that comes out and like when she was living with Kurt Cobain, and there was all this cross-pollination of ideas and stuff like that. And it's like, whoa, where did this come from? And then like, never recreates it again. That all that stuff was created in a very specific environment. And then when the environment was broken, it was gone. And so, yeah, I think like the Wilco, as they were, obviously the Wilco is a very stable dad band now, and they're still cranking away. There are all these moments in the movie where people's awareness of the camera leads them to be dicks or to be defensive more than I think they would have been. And like when they get rid of Jay and they talk to the band, first of all, Jeff Tweedy's like, well, I think you'd have to ask Jay why he left the band. It's like, you fucking fired him. And then, so if Jay is watching this, he's like, fuck you, like there's no way this band's ever going to reconcile with this guy at this point. And then Leroy Bach, they cut to Leroy Bach and he's like, yeah, I'd have to say that this is like 16 years of friendship that's, come to an end. He's just like, really fucking cold, and he says it on camera. So like,
all that rubbed me really the wrong way, and this is even before watching the Jay Bennett documentary.
Likewise.
There's throughout there's this current of like corporate, anti-corporate like behavior.
Yeah,
and the only way I can like really like frame that lens is that Jay Bennett was like he was an artist. In Wilco, and I'm not saying the rest of Wilco weren't artists, but I think comparatively he had that like weird creative drive that can be really difficult to work with when you're not a creative. And I think like that tension like was driving a lot of that, was that he's difficult to work with because he's so much more creative than everybody around him. So there's this undercurrent of like corporate versus anti-corporate, and in that sort of dynamic, I saw Jay Bennett as like the anti-corporate and the rest of Wilco as like, you know, Jeff Tweedy said it himself. Like, I felt kind of stupid for believing that like we would blow, like every album we've been told we're going to blow up, but he obviously believed it. And like, this is their meal ticket. Like the rest of the band got in line quick when it came to the Jay Bennett, because this is their gig. This is their life. This is more than just a job. This is like the chance of a lifetime. And so given the choice between just deal with the creative driver here, which may or may not lead to, you know, more lightning in a bottle down the road, or go with the obviously like alpha in the group who is making all the decisions and is going to win anyway. Sorry, Jay. Bye.
But it sounds like sour grapes the way they present it in the I'm Trying to Break Your Heart movie. They cut to him and he's like, basically his shirt is the same color as the room and his face is very pale, so he just looks naked and like sad, and his hair's drooping down, and he's just like, yeah, you know, it's a corporate band, and they, you know, they have to fall in line, you know, or you'll see what happens, you know, I'm gone, you know. And when I watched it the first time, I was like, sour grapes, you know, this guy is just like, you know, pissed off, and he's like, oh, you know, of course he felt threatened by me in the band, and you're like, yeah, that's what someone would say.
Yeah, I know. I was like,
kicked out of the band. But like, he probably did feel threatened by it. You know, the whole circle can only have one center speech is absolutely like, hey, I'm the leader of this band, and you got to get the fuck out of here. You got too close to the center. I really do believe that it was a lot of what's behind it, but the rest of the band are beta guys. You know, John Sturratt, who looks like fucking Andre Agassi in the early 80s. You know, the rest of those guys, you know, Glenn Cochi is just, I love Glenn Cochi. He's like mesmerizing to watch. And I saw a little solo show he did at Pitchfork, but he's a get in line guy. He's just like, I'm staying the fuck out of all of this, man. I just want to play the drums. They got in line. The filmmaker got in line.
Mm-hmm.
The filmmaker definitely arranged this movie knowing what happened. I don't want to piss off Jeff Tweedy, you know, like I gotta tell his story now.
It's interesting, the filming of it, like the actual like camera work and the colors that are used there. And you're talking about washing out Jay Bennett, because the Jay Bennett documentary kind of goes the opposite direction, where you have these nice watercolors and they portray him as a work of art on screen. Like every animation of him playing the guitar is a watercolor, and very beautifully done. So I'm not like immune to seeing that the way it was portrayed. It still felt like there's a lot more truth coming out of his mom's mouth than Jeff Tweedy's.
One thing I want to bring up, and I think is, and from my perspective, is an important point. So, and I picked up on this a lot more in this rewatch of this. So, this is Jeff's band, right? And Jeff surrounds himself with people that essentially are there as hired guns to make his vision come to life. This isn't their band, right? So that sort of came very clear to me, where he's doing the whole heavy metal drummer thing. He's like, no, I want it to stop here. Right. So I think a lot of the Jay Bennett tension is like, yes, like I don't think he gets a free pass, right? Because you know, a lot of these guys like Leroy Bach or whoever are brought in, and Jay Bennett originally was just a hired gun for a guitar, right? So I think for a lot of this is, you know, whether you're crossing the line, like, yes, you're adding value, and yes, you are a creative individual and you're a fantastic multi-instrumentalist musician. However, at the end of the day, if I bring you into the band and I say, your job is to help me write stuff and make what I'm hearing in my head come to life, and all of a sudden you start wearing hats, and then you go further along and you start pushing further. Yes, you're great at some of the things. Then you start engineering, and then you're mixing, and then you're creating tension with what I don't want. Like, that to me is like, okay, that makes sense if you're the person that says, you know what, you're in his mind potentially not a full-fledged member of this band. Like, your job is to, yes, you're part of the band, but I'm writing the songs and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, that's how I see it in some ways, that like, to me, it is very obvious that you are no longer serving the need that I need you for, and you're overstepping, and you're also potentially maybe annoying the shit out of me. Like, maybe I don't need you. And I will say this, like, Jeff is that band. Like, those are all the lyrics that matter are his. It's probably, it's hard to like argue with the founder of the band. Like, I think, or not giving Jeff enough credit. I think, he is essentially the focal point of the entire of Wilco. So, I think it's like putting yourself around like around with like session musicians. And sometimes the session musicians work. And then you say, hey, why don't you come out on a tour with me, to play these songs. Right. And then they sort of become part of the band and they keep writing. But at the end of the day, I still asked you to come tour with me. I didn't ask you to fucking join the band. So, that's kind of how I see it, and to the point where it's like, hey, at the end of the day, if it's my band and I'm not happy, then you got to go. And I feel like I initially saw this a little differently. Like, I have sympathy for Jay, but I also feel like you have to understand the dynamics of a band. And if you're not that guy, like, as you guys said earlier, you sort of have to fall in line to the guy like that. That's because at the end of the day, if you don't, you're fucking gone. Like, and there's been a number of guys, like, they kicked the drummer out right before this started filming. So it's like, nobody's safe except for the guy that started the fucking band and John Sturratt, who was in Uncle Tupelo with him. So I to me is like, I get it. It sounds harsh, but it's also from an artistic standpoint, it makes sense to me. Like you almost want to say like, oh my God, you're kicking yourself in the dick because like this guy makes great shit with you. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, but I'm also really good at this. Yeah. And it's like, 75% of the band is me and it's my band. He doesn't know where, like, maybe didn't know where to stop pushing the noise and the fucking this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, all right, we got to buckle down and make a fucking song, and that's kind of how that's my personal, like, a long-winded take. But I also kind of feel like I could see that happening, which is like someone who has their hand in everything, and you're not listening to the guy that's like, no, I have this idea, help me make it happen. And you're just fucking fiddling and making shit constantly and being an artist. Right. But maybe that's not what he wanted to do anymore. And I can see how that could rub people the wrong way. But anyways, feel free. We can chop a lot of this shit.
I feel like that these are valid points. The problem is that Summerteeth is the problem because he leaned on Jay Bennett for Summerteeth.
You don't know that,
and yeah, you do, because you can see who wrote the fucking songs and what they played on all these songs and who mixed them and all this stuff. If you look this stuff up, it's like Jay Bennett. He like played 8-10 instruments on each song. He like co-wrote most of the songs with Jeff Tweedy. Jeff Tweedy gets credited with the lyrics a lot of the time, but like, the lyrics have to get, like Mermaid Avenue, the lyrics have to get paired with music. These are two people working together in the same project. He let Jay Bennett in hardcore, like way, way high level, let him in on Summerteeth. And then he suddenly was like, I don't want that anymore. And so, Jay Bennett did feel like, hey, we're Lennon McCartney. We're blood brothers, man. We make the music and these other guys are session musicians, like Wilco is now a two-headed monster and they have very different ways that they want to be. And it worked out okay when there wasn't so much pressure on it because they weren't going to take over the world with Summerteeth. But as they point out again and again with Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, they're like, it's $1,000 a minute. Every time we spend a minute talking, it's more money going out the window. And Tony Marguerite's there and there's a film crew aspect. And we're with Warner Records now and they want a big album from us. And in that crucible, can't do it anymore. It's too much. Yeah.
All right. Well, this podcast is costing us $1,000 a month. So,
that's, to me,
let's rate this sucker.
It's crazy that we could have, like, I could probably keep talking about this. I don't know why.
I know.
In terms of just
I still have stuff to say too. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. We went into a lot of it, but it's, we didn't even, the whole record label thing.
Well, you still got your review to, put it all out there. So
I really wanted to talk about David Frick's hair.
You can the review. Which I tried to get to 5 minutes ago. Well, all right. So on a scale of shark sandwich to smell the glove, shark sandwich being F minus, smell the glove being an A plus, obviously, in Spinal Tap history. So how do you want to rate this? Do we rate I Am Trying to Break Your Heart and Jeff Bennett?
I don't think we can do that, Josh.
I'm not even going to rate the Jay Bennett one. I don't consider that as like part of the. I see that as canon. Like research alongside the album to then inform my decision based on the actual documentary that we picked. I didn't watch the whole Jay Bennett documentary.
Oh, you didn't?
I mean, I watched most of the beginning.
Are
and
you
then
trying to break my heart right now?
I watched all of the stuff related to Yankee Hotel Foxtrot and that whole controversy for like that 20 minutes of the thing.
Mhm.
I mean, I kind of know his story that, you know, he tragically passed away based upon fentanyl patch. We didn't even talk about that.
You're the one who suggested watching.
I didn't say add it as a secondary thing to then rate. I said, hey, check out this documentary. It talks about Jay's side of the story.
Yeah. I think we just rate I'm Trying to Break Your Heart because that was the original assignment, right? Like
Yeah.
if he didn't even watch the second one all the way, we can't have two people that watch it and one that
All right.
didn't. and-
Then Greg.
You can't use that as a reference to
Fire
inform
away.
your decision.
No, I'm fully fucking kidding. Like, don't care. You guys are taking me very seriously,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm not serious at
Well,
all.
you have to be
So,
like,
I
whatever.
want you to
do need to
understand me.
decide how heavy metal drummer starts.
I want you to
Can we please
understand.
Fucking
Understand.
figure this out, guys.
I want you to understand what I'm trying to say.
I don't have to understand you all the time, Joshua. It's okay.
Greg, rate away, buddy.
All right, I'm gonna just. I guess I'm just gonna review. I'm Trying to Break Your Heart. Yeah, I had a lot of regard for this movie when I saw it in 2002 or 3. Whenever we got the Netflix DVD mailed to us, the wife and I, and we both like Wilco, so we watched it and we're like, wow, that was really affecting, especially when they kick Jay out of the band and they have that dissolve of the Beatles-ish guys prancing around on the lakefront, and it kind of like, you know, breaks apart and you're like, damn, that was well done. You know, that's a good cinematic moment. I think it's a little poncy to have it in black and white. You know, to be honest, I'm like, come on, Mr. Filmmaker. Give me a fucking break. What
One
does this
question on
add
that,
to
because
it?
I don't know the honest answer, not to cut you
Yeah.
off. Is it cheaper to shoot that way or no?
No, I think it's more expensive, honestly.
Okay, I don't know.
These days, you could just put a fucking filter on and it doesn't
In this
cost
economy,
anything.
yeah.
But back then, you had to buy the film and shit. You know, and he's like, I know, I want to shoot it in grainy Super 8, and, you know, or whatever the fuck. I found that a little poncy. I was just like, this is whatever. Okay, you're an auteur. I feel like he's definitely, you know, is a suck up to Tweedy and the finished product. You know, I feel like he's a company man as well. So I respect him a little less for that. I feel like they did do Jay pretty wrong in the movie. I felt they did him wrong in the band. I do feel like it was inevitable because they were growing too big for each other, and it wasn't the Beatles. It wasn't like we all four formed a band together and we are equal partners in this thing. And even then the Beatles fractured, but like they held on longer. This is a company band and it's Jeff's company. So they were going to break up eventually. He was going to kick Jay out of the band eventually. But the movie hastened it, I think. And I think it made reconciling in the future probably impossible, just because of how bad they did him. That said, it is, you know, it's a well-constructed documentary. I I have to. I love Wilco, but I will fault the movie for having too much concert footage. You're like, I know these songs, dude. I mean, like, okay, you can play the whole goddamn album. I think some of the interviewees, they really pulled some great stuff out of. I think he got great stuff out of Tony Margarita. I got a really good feel for that guy. I actually really like was solidly in his camp. I was like, he's a company man, but that's his job to be a company man. And he really fought for that band. He really didn't give a fuck who he pissed off, you know, in the upper ups. He really believed that they had a great product that someone else would want, and he was right. It's like holding on to a little stock and being like, "This is going to be a big stock," and it, you know, and it pays off. I think they did weird stuff with his wife, Susie, Tweedy's wife. I was like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is this? And I also know
what, like the Burger King thing.
Yeah, where it's like, well, we don't have any money. Oh, they're starving. But like, that's again positioned to be
Money
like,
in the
these guys don't even have
Yeah,
money for a burger for their
Then
child.
he's like, all right, I'll go get money.
I'm gonna
I'll
go get money in the.
How did he
But
get money, guys? Did he play a concert outside? in order
I
to get
know
money?
exactly.
No, he fucking went to the bus and got some
He
money.
got more money. He just didn't have any on him. Not I didn't have money because I'm broke. They're in a giant tour bus and they're playing these huge festivals.
Come on, Sam Jones.
Yeah,
Correction.
so
I think it was a Wendy's actually.
it was some place I never heard of, like Bennett's or I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then
really?
Tony
Like a
Margarita walks up into the lobby He doesn't have fucking money.
I know, everyone's got money. It's okay. You know, the filmmaker does that. You know, he plays things up like, oh, look at the you know, the despondent girl. They're just hanging on by their fingernails while Warner just rakes them over the coals. And like, no, they're doing fine. But
Here,
yeah,
check if so-and-so needs a diaper change.
Yeah.
I know, sniff his butt. And the thing is, I know someone who knew them, who knows Susie, and when she was managing lounge acts and stuff like that, and she's like, Jeff Tweedy just cheated on her all the fucking time. It was an open secret, you know, that he fucked around so much. So I'm like, man, I have less respect there. But yeah,
Heroes will always let you down.
yeah, don't know me your heroes, even on film. And yeah, he's kind of scary in this movie a bunch of times, where not like he's gonna knife you, but you're like, he's intimidating. But yeah, overall, I thought it was too much concert footage, too much meanness, too much spinning. He created drama, so you know, as a piece of entertainment, I would give it probably a B for the, you know, kind of underhanded tactics and the creative splicing of scenes together. I would give that a C. So, I mean, I'll give it a B minus. I like the movie more than that. If I wasn't a fan of the band and I wasn't invested in the people and the real people in the story, I would give it a higher grade. When I first saw it, I probably would have given it an A minus.
American Dixie Cup drinker. Do you want to give yours? Would you like me to go?
Do you want to assassin down the avenue with your review?
Yeah, I can go. Like I said, I agree with Greg. Had I, so that would have been 20-year-old me would have given this a far higher score, just because I was in it. You know, I was so invested in this band. But I think fast forward now, I mean, I'd still give it a B. I think, because I think he did make a compelling film. I think the fact that we could talk about it so much, and you know, was it spliced correctly, creating the dynamic to it, I think gives it the drama, like, but as a filmmaker, it's hard to say how much of it was steered in one direction versus the other, how you wanted to make it cut, but at the end of the day, like, I still enjoyed the music making process of it. I still think it's really cool, like, just kind of being able to see inside the machine a little bit. And this is a beloved album of mine, so even seeing some part of its construction was really fascinating. I think I love that, like you said, he definitely caught lightning in a bottle in this case, just so happened to be filming this album and not the other one, kind of thing. So I think there's some luck involved, but that's awesome. Like that worked. Like, that's what makes it a good documentary. And it covers a lot of themes that I think there's not just lightning in a bottle in terms of the band, but I think there was that turning point in the music industry as we moved away. Like this was like downloading, digital streaming, and we're moving away from albums. And I've talked about this in previous podcasts, like how I feel about that. Like, I really dislike the fact that I think Greg and I have talked about this a lot too, which is no longer sitting with albums anymore. Like, no one wants to do that. Like, it's too accessible. It's too easy to make. No one has the tolerance to sit down and listen to an album, to being there type thing from front to back. And I think that's the consequence of what this music, the label is doing. It's like, hey, we can't make our money back based on this. This is what it costs. We don't care about art. All we care about is the bottom line. It costs us X. And this is how much it's going to cost to promote. We're not going to make money. Get rid of them. And one thing we didn't talk about is that they do talk about the former president of Reprise, who just happened to retire before this thing, and he signed the band. And he was like, I can guarantee you, if I was still head of the record, Wilco never would have been dropped. Right. So it's like there's a changing of the guard and of the mindset of what artists are and how the labels are going to operate. And it's all about the bottom line. It's not about, hey, there's a really cool artist and let's just let them get this thing and help them put it out into the world. It's not about that anymore. It's all about dollars and cents, how much you fucking cost. You don't make us money. Fuck off. So yeah, I think, but from swinging back to my rating, I think it's a B. Maybe I agree with you. I never really thought about that. There's a lot of concert footage, but I probably actually skipped some of that because it's like, oh, I know these songs.
I look down sometimes and I was like, I should watch this.
Yeah, but it's like, no, I know that one. I know War and War.
He's just playing guitar.
Were you tuned to E on that one?
I know.
So, but yeah, I still enjoy it. I thought it was really fun to rewatch. I glad I found the Jay Bennett thing just because which came out quite a bit later.
Yeah,
So,
21.
Yeah.
yeah. So it's like,
yeah, a lot.
it was fitting to kind of revisit it now to be like, oh shit. All right. So now you get a different perspective and go back and watch it. So I still think it's good. I think it's a B. I still love the band in this time period. It just has like, had got a little patina on it at this point of like, it doesn't sit the same, but I still love this record. I love the records before this. Can't say the same. I mean, I still love A Ghost Is Born. I think that's a great album too.
But that was written. There are only 12 tracks on this album on Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, and they recorded a jack ton of songs during that period, and many of them were in A Ghost Is Born.
I knew it would kind of turn into a Jay versus Jeff argument, but I feel like that's the component of this documentary that, I mean, hell, it's the reason there's a fucking Jay Bennett documentary.
Yeah.
I'll end it there, even though if you guys want to take this offline, I could talk about this for another hour.
I know. I feel the same way. Oh, I will say this too, Brian. You were just talking about, going back. It's got the patina on it and stuff like that. It reminded me, like, when I was watching this, I did have this big nostalgia for, like, old Chicago. They show the city skyline, and it's all
the lakefront,
grimy looking. You can walk in these crappy little alleys downtown, even like Ohio Street, where he goes to the studio to record, the fancy studio. I'm like, that's still kind of a dumpy area. Then he's walking around the alleys there. I do miss gritty, old Chicago, and that place that I stayed in with those two dudes I didn't know. It got bulldozed and turned into a condo tower with an elevator in the middle of it. And most of that, so much of the old Chicago is gone, and it was just definitely nostalgic to look back and be like, wow, there it is. I was at that show.
I enjoyed all of this. It was coming back 20 years later and watching it like with different eyes, discovering all the backstory and just like fleshing out and giving a lot more depth to this music that I've really enjoyed, but probably didn't devote very much thought to, or wherewithal to actually go and research or anything, as is like probably my trademark for like really loving something but like not really
just getting
diving
super
into
it.
Loving something but leaving early. He's like,
yeah, a little bit. It was all very compelling.
It's like walking into a soap opera.
Yeah, I'm just like, all these things that I sort of understand already. Yeah, so I agree with almost everything that Greg that you said about who said what. I think the truth falls somewhere in the middle. It's tough for me to like paint Jeff Tweedy as like the bad guy or anything like that. I don't think there's these are all humans and they all do their human stuff. And I definitely think the I'm Trying to Break Your Heart did Jay dirty, and I think the Where Are You, Jay Bennett is, designed as the counterpoint to that. So it's necessarily going to be very pro Jay and very anti Jeff Tweedy. And so you can't take that fully on its face. But I actually will go so far as to say if you're going to watch one, I think you have to watch the other to sort of make sense of it all. And so I'm kind of glad I didn't see I Am Trying to Break Your Heart 20 years ago and waited and saw them sort of back to back, because I feel like I have a fuller picture of the whole thing. And so I would recommend to any listeners out there to do the same if you haven't watched any of them. But it gave me an opportunity to like dive deeper into Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, which is not one of my favorite albums of theirs. It's a great album, but I think I got more appreciation for how each of them was constructed and layered and the story behind each of them. And that fucking version of Camera though, man, that's going... That is going in the heavy rotation. Like,
is that going on the playlist?
It sounds like it's already in
100%. 100%. So yeah, I give I'm Trying to Break Your Heart like a C+. It's definitely a hatchet piece. It's pretentious as fuck. Way too much like cut into the B-roll of just them playing music. Like where it's like, this isn't moving the story forward or giving me a better idea about them.
Yeah, it's like 4-minute song, 5-minute song. Okay.
What's his name? The director?
Sam Jones.
Sam Jones. Really just hit the jackpot with this. I don't know.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't rate the Jay Bennett one, but it's you can't do one without the other. So
yeah.
It's a companion piece.
It's a companion piece, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a rando next week.
Rando.
We have 44 items on the randomizer.
God.
Are you guys ready for it?
It's a lot.
Depends on if I like the
A
pick.
wide
I'm almost
variety.
never ready for it. I want the pick. I'm always like,
What's it gonna be?
oh.
All right. Beep, boop, 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 boop. Number 38. Boondock Saints.
Ooh,
I've never seen that one.
I've never seen it either.
that's good. Willem Dafoe.
Everyone always tells me if I'm from Boston, I should see Boondock.
I'm very
Saints.
skeptical about this one.
Yeah,
This
Ah.
one's good, but
Yeah, it's like a gangster movie.
It's a lot of like dudes tell me that I
Yeah,
should see
exactly.
Boondock Saints, where they're like, the guy with a tool shirt.
I didn't want to say that, but
I don't know.
yeah, you're spot on. Like people I know who
you haven't
have
seen it?
questionable taste in things.
I
I
remember
really like those movies.
being
You
a
gotta
good
see
performance
that.
by Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, I like Defoe.
That's what happens when you leave it up to fate.
One last question before we leave, though.
Yeah.
Why doesn't Jeff Tweedy believe in touchdowns?
Oh, well, he's probably one of those guys that calls everything sports ball.
Oh, okay. All right. See you next week.
Ciao.
Riding the bus to work, reading cartoons in Newsweek magazine, listening to Massive Attack.
Why don't we mix it to the end and then make the cut? Well, what if we mixed it from the beginning?
I'm gonna go throw up.
That's it.